The thing that the world convinces you of is that you don't have what you already need to start building a foundation for what your version of wealth is. And what it probably is that you haven't slowed down enough yet to be asked the questions that make you go through that thought experiment.
Paying yourself first. So the contrast of that would be not paying yourself first, which is what most people do, which is I'm going to pay everything else. And if there is anything left over at the end of the month, I might put it into a savings account or somewhere else. Paying yourself first is I know what money is coming in, I know what money is going out, and I know what should be left over. So I'm going to go ahead and take what that number is and put it in a savings account before I spend any of that money.
Where attention goes, our intentions follow. So just write down where your attention goes. Anybody listening, I dare you to track it down for a week. Where's your attention? And I'm guilty of this, guys. You guys know that I'm diagnosed OCD and I'm not scared to share that. Where my attention goes is where my intentions follow. And that can be a train wreck waiting to happen if that snowball gets rolling downhill for something negative. But it also can be one of the most beautiful things ever when you're looking for opportunities to let your strengths impact people in a positive way.
Welcome to the Cashflow Legendz podcast with your hosts, Nate, Brandon, and Brock. Remember, our insights are not direct financial advice, so consult with your financial team before making any decisions based on the topics discussed in this show.
Welcome back to Cashflow Legendz. Nate and Brock and I are here enjoying some cool weather. We all live.
It's not cool. It's cold.
It's cold. Excuse me. Like this morning, I walked out and it was 12 in East Texas, which is not normal. And
eight down here in Southeast Texas.
Here,
it was 6 in Nashville this morning.
Okay, so we had a 6, 8, and a 12. Now, Brock and Nate, y'all have snow on the ground, correct?
We do not.
You don't.
We got 7 inches yesterday,
which is almost unheard of in your neck of the woods.
It's the most snowfall in that time period since like 1890 or something like that. It's insane.
Wow. Well, what a blessing to start off with, knowing that we're all in a house that has heat, which that just makes you very grateful immediately, especially if you walk the dogs this morning and you're like, holy moly, if I had to live out in this, I'd be struggling. All right. So today, what are we talking about? We're going to have some fun talking about how do we keep more of our money and how do we make it work for ourselves. But the main topic is 7 Habits of Millionaires. And we're going to kind of reframe millionaires in general and what that really means. Because interestingly enough, what if I told you you're already a millionaire? Most people don't know that or believe that, but with a little bit of a willingness to learn math, most of us in America already are, or already on our way to being that if we're working in a job that is pretty sound. So remember last week we started with breaking the paycheck to paycheck cycle. And it's interesting, guys, no matter who we talk to, especially I think a lot of our conversations for Nate and I, Brock talks to a lot of business owners that have already created some wealth and some cash flow that's, above what they're spending. But we see this resounding theme that if you're not clear on what wealth means to you, you always feel like you're on this financial treadmill by design, and you don't even realize it's by design, no matter how much money you make. So I'll start with this, Brock. Before you knew what your dad did and before you really started diving into it, did you believe that wealth was a mindset thing or how much money you made thing?
I was 12, so
okay.
I don't know. I'm kidding.
And as you got older,
I'm kidding.
I know.
What I thought it was more of, how much money you made. Cause you'd see the superstars, the athletes out there, and they're making all these bukus of money that the stars are entertainers, they're making all this money. This is what you see. Like, this is what you think wealth is. They just have tons of money coming in the door and they just got piles of money sitting in the bank. And that's what I thought wealth was. But the more that I get to be around these people, I really learn who is actually broke and who is wealthy. And wealthy to me continues to evolve, and I gain a better understanding of wealth to know that for me, wealth is the byproduct of a life well lived and your ability to be present.
the currency of attention in today's world has really even pushed that to another level, because now you've got people out there on social media that are taking pictures of cars, that they are hanging out around cars that they may own or they may have rented to make people think they own. And so if you ask the average person, what is the definition of wealth or whatever, it's always, not always, but for the most part, it's going to trigger a car, a big house. Like there's some sort of tangible object that they're going to attach it to, a big bank account, whatever. So we have this really awesome job of helping people get clarity on what wealth really is, not what they think it is.
That's really good, Nate. So we're gonna label this the 7 Habits of Millionaires, but we're gonna kind of give our perspective on what really being a millionaire means, what you just heard Brock and Nate elaborate on a little bit with getting real clear on what wealth means. And I love Brock's definition of a life well lived. Well, if you don't know what a life well lived is, then we start there. And guys, I don't know if you're like me, but I have conversations often where that's not even known yet in someone's life. And so how could we ever define what wealth is if we don't know what a life well lived is? And so there's a key piece that I like to really lean on that the world keeps us in, and we know this, is that I can make all the money in the world and still be of a scarcity mindset and thinking there's never enough. I can also have no money and have a scarcity mindset and thinking I got to get more. And I see it all day long, every day. We see that. We have the privilege to have those conversations. So first thing most millionaires understand, and we're going to frame it in the idea of they already understand what wealth means to them and freedom means to them and peace of mind means to them and a life well lived. Okay. Because you can be a miserable millionaire. Miserable. I've met a few. Brock, I'm sure you have too. Nate, I know you have. Okay. And I've met some of the most joyful people who barely even have a dollar to their name. So money doesn't make that happen. It's something much bigger than that. Okay. But the first thing you'll hear most people say is they pay themselves first. All right. This is a very hard concept if you've never heard this before, especially if you grew up like I did. And work hard, save your money, be a good steward of your money, pay off all your bills, don't have debt. It's pretty much how we were raised. And that's way better than spend all your money, don't have any, don't save. But that's there's different stages. So when you guys hear pay yourself first, let's go to a very simplistic approach. Let's not go too far into the weeds right now. What does that really mean for somebody listening to this for the first time and going, what the crap does that mean? How do you pay yourself first when you got bills and you got electricity and you got travel and you got expenses that are unexpected? How do you pay yourself first?
Paying yourself first. So the contrast with that would be not paying yourself first, obviously, which is what most people do, which is I'm going to pay everything else. And if there is anything left over at the end of the month, I might put it into a savings account or somewhere else. Paying yourself first is I know what money is coming in, I know what money is going out, and I know what should be left over. So I'm going to go ahead and take what that number is and put it in a savings account before I spend any of that money. That right there, I think, is the second best thing. The first best thing is understanding what you actually have coming in, what's going out.
Good.
I probably meet, so there's the clients that I have, and then the clients of all the advisors that I do joint work with and help them with their clients. And I can't tell you how many times that I will meet with a family and they might have a rough estimate of what's coming in the door, but they have zero clue of what's going out the door. Well, I'm no genius. I feel like I'm pretty smart, but I don't think it takes genius to know this, that if you don't know what's coming in and you definitely don't know what's going out, how the heck are you going to know what you have to use somewhere else? And I think that's the first thing that we have to get across is know what you have. And then that paying yourself first is going to become really easy. And before I forget, talking about Nate's point of view, I also get to talk with a lot of people who are social media influencers that look very wealthy. And what I've found is the younger that people are and the faster they get a larger amount of wealth or income, the easier it is to say, look at me, let me show you what I drive. And usually those things are pretty flashy, whether it's Lamborghinis or Dodge TRXs or whatever it is, that's typically the first place that people go is either a watch or a car. And I've been blessed to be in some of the coolest rooms with the wealthiest people in the world. And when you were talking about that, Nate, just the other day, this was right before Christmas, so not just the other day. I was hanging out with a buddy of mine, and he is worth 9 figures. And it's not a low 9 figures. It's like a lot of 9 figures. And we're hanging out. We're going to go do our morning workout because I'm hanging out with him this week in his state of the world. And he's like, hey, let's go to the car. He's parked in the parking garage. This guy's worth 9 figures. And he drives a Hyundai Passat. And the other thing that I like to talk about is the fact that, like, yeah, millionaires are very cool. Like, I get to talk to them a lot. They're fun. It's interesting to see millionaires. But I can tell you that that's just a metric that the world has given us. There, if you think about, Justin Donald, great buddy of mine, he wrote the Lifestyle Investor book. He was financially free before he was a millionaire. For me, I was financially free before I was a millionaire. And when you begin to see that and you understand, oh, wait a second, I don't have to be a millionaire to be financially free or set to say, hey, I get to be present. I get to do the things that I want to do. That really frees you up to live a life that you want and by your own design.
So for the sake of being sure that we hit all 7, I'm going to go to the second one with you, Nate, because Brock, we could just stay right there on that first topic. The
Yeah,
rest of this
I didn't
episode.
have anything to add to that.
Okay. So, when we think about that, you'll hear this often, and we want to add a little caveat or excerpt to this, but you'll hear millionaires build multiple streams of income. And I can tell you from personal experience that that is a rabbit that I chased, that I did not catch, that I now know where there is some half truths in that. And I'll let Nate touch on it first. But multiple streams of income are only as good as what, Nate, for you? And what does that mean to you from what we know so far?
For those watching, I'm gonna point to my guitar right here behind me because it reminds me of an analogy that I've shared before. Some people might say, getting out over your skis, but I equate it to this. Sometimes we have the tendency when we first start making a little bit of money or getting exposed to a world that we're unfamiliar with. I equate it to picking up the guitar for the first time, learning one chord, and challenging Carlos Santana to a guitar battle. The idea of multiple streams of income is really appealing and everything like that. But the reality is you need to master one stream of income before you start moving on to another one. Because if you start checking off all these boxes and all these different asset classes, thinking that you're doing everything right, I would venture to say for the most part, people are going to find out at some point that they did it completely backwards. And that if they would have just focused on one stream of income and then expanded from there, they would have laid a very solid foundation for themselves and not live with a lot of regret.
To add to that, because number 3 is they invest in themselves. And I would flip-flop it. I'd say, are you investing in yourself more than you are chasing streams of income? And so a lot of times now, because of my failures, this is cool how the Lord works, is if we'll allow it, our test become a testimony for his kingdom. I will say, as we're going through those inflows and outflows, Brock, which most of us have no clue specifically of one or the other. We see that all the time. Hey, where in here is investing in yourself on your line items? What do you mean? And this is really fascinating. I'm guilty of this. So this is not a judgment statement, but if you put where all the money's going out of your life and you literally put beside it C or P, produce or consume, you will notice that 80 to 90% of the outgo is consumption and consumerism. It's paying for a phone bill. It's paying for the biggest room in your house, which is your TV and entertainment room. It's paying for travel. It's paying for 30% credit card debt that you've consumed on, which I'm guilty of. So this is not judgmental statements. This is reality. So I tell people, start flip-flopping one of those C's to a P. How are you going to produce? How are you going to provide value? Well, one of the best ways to do that is to learn. And you can do almost anything almost for free until you find that rhythm with YouTube, library, books from your friends that you have that you think are crazy that may not be so crazy because they read all the time, that they'll share with you. So if you invest in yourselves and you make that first uncomfortable move, Brock, even if it's $100 in the line item, like I'm going to invest in myself $100 a month, that right there can have a ripple effect for those streams of income because it helps us get clear on more where we're supposed to be working and the purpose. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. When I always find it funny when people are like, "Oh, well, they have." I think they talk about 7 streams of income. The average
You hear
millionaire.
that one a lot. Yeah.
And it's always funny because it's not necessarily the millionaires that really try to follow that the most. It's the middle or lower class. And so you'll find somebody who's making 80, 90, 100 grand a year that's like, oh, I'm putting my money in Forex. I'm putting my money here. I'm going to go buy real estate. I'm learning how to do this. I'm doing this. And it's like, with what? $5,000? Like, what are you doing? You've got to take a step back and lay your foundation first. And then once you have a substantial amount of money, you're taken care of, your family's taken care of, then you go into the stage of actually building out these income streams. And then you really start diving into them, because I think what oftentimes is you forget about the golden goose that's laying the golden egg. And so, as one of my mentors, Michael Eisen, talks about a lot, is you are your number one asset. Your number one investment is the thing or career that has put the most amount of income or cash in your pocket, aka yourself, your business. That is your number one investment. Nothing will put as much money into your pocket as you and your business, right? And so, oftentimes our business will be doing really good, but then we get bored. So then when we get bored, we'll go start something like crypto or Forex or real estate. Well, Forex starts going down. They shut down the algorithm. They don't like it, or something comes up and it starts not doing as great. Well, now your brain stops going towards your business, your golden goose, or your goose. I don't know if it's golden goose because I'm thinking about the shoes, but it goes to your goose. It goes away from your goose to that new investment that you thought was going to be your shining knight armor, whatever the frame is, and it's going to save the day for you, and you're going to be wealthy that way. Well, now you start focusing on that because it's going down. You stop focusing on the goose, which is your business laying the golden eggs, and then it gets sick and it starts going down. Now you have to take your attention to both of these things. It's messing with your mental capacity. You're not producing the way that you should. And so the whole thing just starts falling apart. And you got to say, man, that was a bad decision. I got to let go of the Forex or whatever it was and go back to my goose that was laying the golden egg.
Yep.
And that's where you've got to go first, and then work with the professionals to go towards that next thing to help produce more into your life. Because people often ask me, what's my order in which I invest? And I think this lines up with investing in yourself. Number one is quality of life. This is like your doctors, your nutrition, your workouts, your health. Because if you don't have any energy to show up, then what's the point of all this stuff anyways? Number two is, how can you invest in a skill set to upgrade your income? Because you know that income is a byproduct of the value you create. Next is, how do you invest in yourself to become a better investor? A lot of people say, well, I don't know where to invest. Okay, well, that just means you need to go invest in yourself so you do know what's going on and you can understand how to read financial statements and documents and all this stuff. And then once you have those 3 things, then you can then start buying these assets, these cash flowing assets, and investing in them so that you do start building up your income streams.
Good stuff,
You know,
Brock.
this reminds me of a conversation I had with one of our members this week, because the traditional financial world, and this sort of goes back to multiple streams of income, The traditional financial world is a comparison game for the most part. You know, people jump into assets and jump into investments a lot of times because they see other people doing it, not because they are equipped to be able to take on that investment. And one of the things that we've gotten so much clarity on these past few months is just the value of reinvesting back into our business, because that is the thing that we know the best. And we say this all the time, Brock, you say it all the time. The risk is not in the investment, it's in the investor. And so when we focus on the things that we are proficient at and reinvesting back into those things, more often, we're going to find a greater return in that thing that we know the best than chasing some rate of return as something we're not sure about.
So you guys have kind of described a couple of things that will segue into this next thought. And this can be a quick one because we talk about whole life and we talk about infinite banking process and all that all the time. But our wealth and where it resides, or the money we create by the value we create, or the money that follows the value we create, is going to always have to reside or sit somewhere. Period. And so I can say with certainty, after 7 years of paying premiums into whole life and chasing rates of return in something I didn't understand, if I had it to do over again and I poured all that energy into paying more premiums, i.e., investing in my greatest asset, myself, that I can literally look back and go, I would be in such a better financial position. And this is not regret. This is lessons learned to hopefully share with others, than going out and using someone else's money that I didn't control for a return I didn't get, that took longer than I expected. And it wasn't ideal. Okay. But what we hope always is that our lessons can become someone else's without all the heartache and the headache that comes with it. Because there is a true thing called decision fatigue that Brock was describing. And you only have so many decisions in a day before you want to curl up into the fetal position and go, I don't know what to do. So what millionaires that clearly know what wealth is to them, which I love Brock's simplicity, a life well lived. What does a life well lived look like to you? If you don't know that, stop and start working on that first. Because you can get so far out in left field chasing what everybody else says to chase that you go, oh my gosh, I'm so lost. It takes a lot of energy to get back. So what millionaires understand is that your money's working for you or for someone else always. We believe whole life insurance is a great first place to go, but your insurability, i.e. your greatest asset, is the most important thing to protect your ability to create income, wherever that's at right now in your life. But here's my favorite one that is becoming more and more relevant. They also understand that relationship capital, I believe, is one of the most important types of capital that we can have. And it requires you to be accountable at a level that attracts the type of people you want to be attracted to you. Because that 9-figure guy that Brock's working out with wouldn't just hang out with Brock if there wasn't some value or some desire to grow or learn or some genuineness. He wouldn't be giving his time to Brock. I know that with certainty now. If there wasn't already proof in the pudding. That is the power of relationship capital. It's basically going, I don't have it all figured out. And I have found the wealthiest people we've been around that live a life well lived want to help people that want to do the work and say, I know nothing. I'm learning. And I'm so honored to be even in this room having this conversation. The crazy thing is, Nate and Brock, is the wealthiest people we know, money-wise, life well lived-wise, are the ones who always say, to the best of my knowledge right now, I'm still learning. I haven't figured it out yet. There's a lot to learn, because they know that is an ongoing life process. And you'll never, ever figure it all out. But then I talk to someone who's in scarcity mindset, who can't even hardly pay the bills, and they're telling everybody what they know about money. And this is the 80% that keep us locked up to that financial rat race. Because to put our pride down and go, who is doing something different that appears to be living a life well lived that's different than my life that I have around me that I could ask if they'd be willing to teach me something that maybe I don't know. Most of us as men, I'm only speaking for men, not women, have this little issue called pride. And we don't want to set down our pride enough to know that somebody could know something more than we could, which means we will never be able to grow to the full capacity God's created us to grow in. So if there's something in your mind, here's an action step. Y'all know I love action steps. Men, there's something in your mind, you're like, that makes me so uncomfortable to think about doing, but I feel like it might be good. That's probably where you need to lean into. Because that discomfort, maybe it's going to the gym, maybe it's attending a class that you were talking about, maybe it's calling that friend and working through something you haven't discussed yet. Whatever it is, that is going to allow you to fail faster and grow faster. And that's investing in yourself.
Yep.
So networking is huge. But Brock, I don't know about you, and I know you've been in a lot of rooms where relationship capital is vital, but networking has a negative connotation sometimes for me. That's just me. It's something I'm getting over. It's really more like collaboration in my mind and getting around people who love to pour into others who want to pour into themselves. So talk about that networking a little bit from your point of view.
From my point of view, I also somewhat have a negative connotation to it because everybody's like, oh, well, let's go to this networking event or this meetup or social event. And I used to do those. Like, I'm not going to say that, oh, I'm better than everybody else and I've never done them, all this stuff. Like, no, I went to them. I would go to them, but I never really liked them because the people I knew I identified with and wanted to be around were in different rooms. And so you've got to be very clear about, who am I letting into my life and who do I want to make sure that I'm around? And, sometimes you go to events to make sure that you support friends, and that is good. But oftentimes you got to pay to be in a room. And sometimes paying to be in a room might just be one of the best things you ever do. Because those who pay attention. And I would just tell you that you've got to have going blank on the word. You've got to have like a filter. That's the word I'm looking for. You've got to have a filter for, who you're talking to and what's going on. Like oftentimes people want to give me feedback sometimes. And I learned this from Garrett of somebody come in and say, hey, I'd love to give you some feedback. And I'd say, hey, I think that's great. Why don't you go give it to my feedback team rather than me? Because I can only take my feedback from certain people.
Brock, let's touch on that real quick because I think this is important. So one of the verses that's been marinating through Nate and I's journey from where we started to where we are now is Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. Okay. I had the pleasure of being in a room with 6 to 8 men this past weekend, and they were all very uncomfortable because men's retreat sounds too kumbaya holding hands, but it was just guys getting together wanting to grow. And all those guys there wanting to grow in a way that they saw someone else in that room living a life well lived that they didn't know how to get to. Most of it was centered around faith as the foundational piece, but there was a trust there that I'm coming to this being a little vulnerable. Most of them knew me well, so they were comfortable with that. But Brock, it reminds me and you had a tough conversation earlier this week. You don't take genuine care and love from people who haven't spent the time to show they genuinely care and love about you. In fact, if you get opinions from people you don't know, it reminds me of one of the best things your dad ever taught us when we were paying for his coaching. He said, don't take compliments as a form of payment.
Yeah.
So if you're getting complimented by somebody who's never done what you're doing, that is a compliment. Feel good about it. But be very aware that most of the time people give compliments because they think it's easy to get to where you got. And Nate and I have humbly been able to do this for 7 years. Brock's been around it his entire life. Anything worth doing is going to require work. Period.
Yeah.
And we didn't have this in our list, but I'll kind of pair it together. Number 6, they focus on solutions, not problems. I really, really love that. But they also focus on how they're accountable for their actions and the solutions. So you want a clear indicator of who you want to hang out with, listen and watch and see if the listening and the watching match up. Because when that starts matching up, that's a good indicator that you're heading in the direction that you want to be headed in. If you're in a room where everybody in there complains, guess what's going to happen to you if you stay there very long?
You're going to be a complainer.
Right. And guys, I don't know about y'all, but like, I can't stand it anymore. Like, it's a clear indicator if you're a complainer not willing to change that we're not an ideal fit yet.
The reason I say that you want to watch is because you've got to be able to see that not only what they speak is what they do. It's like you could talk to a nutritionist on the phone and he can tell you the coolest things in the world. But if you find out he's fat or they're fat, if it was a she or whatever, I probably wouldn't listen to them because why are you giving me advice on my nutrition if you're overweight and obese and not eating right? The same is true with, I hate to say this, but there's a lot of financial advisors that I coach that they want to speak into the lives and help these clients of theirs get okay financially. Well, I'm looking at their own finances and it's like, okay, well, you don't have the proper protections. You don't have your cash flow structured and you'll get excuses and say, "Oh, I'm good. I don't need that. I'm all right." No, like if you're going to speak it, live it. I think one of my favorite things to do, and I know you guys probably too, is like I can show my life insurance policies.
Yep.
I can show what I'm using them for. I can show you my current setup and my cash flow structure. I can show you all these things so that you know what's going on, and that I know what I know, and I'm doing what I know to be true. Sorry, Nate. Nate, what did you have to say?
Well, I was thinking about what you said earlier. It reminds me of a talk that we saw Myron Golden share recently, and it's the most successful people are the ones that when they're presented with a circumstance or a fact, they look at the positive side of the situation and not necessarily focused on the negative side. There's a lot of people that when they're presented with some sort of stimulus, they immediately look to the negative side of that situation. And for people who are focused on solutions, that means we're always looking at how is this going to be an opportunity for me to do something really powerful? And it could be any situation. How can I grow through this? Like those are all positive things, but most of the things that we worry about, most of the negative things that we put into our head never happen. And so we spend all this time wasting all this energy on stuff that never happens instead of focusing on how we could grow through that experience.
Man, that's so good. The reason that we got that Myron Golden clip is because one of our members was there and got to visit with him. And then he shared it with us, which is really cool. Like, to me, that's the epitome of a life well lived. When you get to be a part of people's lives and they want to share it with you when they're growing because they know it resonates with you as much as it does them. Like, to me, there's almost nothing better to hear other people be successful. And you got to play a small part of that. That is really, really cool and humbling. And so, Brock, you said something earlier, and this, I think Myron said this also, where attention goes, intention follows. Where attention goes, our intentions follow. So just, write down where your attention goes. Anybody listening? I dare you to track it down for a week. Where's your attention? And I'm guilty of this, guys. You guys know that I'm diagnosed OCD and I'm not scared to share that. Where my attention goes is where my intentions follow. And that can be a train wreck waiting to happen if that snowball gets rolling downhill for something negative. But it also can be one of the most beautiful things ever when you're looking for opportunities to let your strengths impact people in a positive way. Yeah. And so one thing I love about Brock is as Brock's talking about those things, he's not going to hold back any punches, but he's confident in what he's doing and saying. But even though I feel like Brock has helped us raise our level, yes, Nate and I are 43 and he's in his 20s. So there's the first thing you got to get rid of pride-wise. Is that I'm still self-evaluating myself going, comparison is good when it's around the right people. when you're on fire for the Lord and you're around men who are and they're running successful businesses, what's wrong with that? That's a good thing. You know what I mean? So, but what I also know is when those consistent reactions by how what we do and what we say match up, the impact that comes after that is hard to fathom, or what's capable as far as impact goes, because we're in alignment, I believe, passionately with how God created us to glorify Him and the skill sets He's given us. So, Brock, you were at our little event that you and I both got to speak on a panel about in Charlotte. And that was a blessing from the Lord that we got asked to speak on stage and Q&A. And what you notice is what you speak out is what people begin to define you as that want to know more about you. And to Nate and Brock and I, loving the Lord and knowing it's all His anyway on loan to live a life well lived to glorify Him, we're at peace with that. And we want as many men as possible, and women, but men, to be able to realize that doing it on your own and following all traditional financial advice, if it's not getting you where you want to go for a life well lived, is really not the way that you have to live. But it requires a lot of putting down our pride and really recognizing that iron does sharpen iron. And I have to recognize and look for that, or I'm going to be on this little lone wolf island for the rest of my life, always finding problems instead of solutions. Guys, how would you tie all that up from what you've learned so far? Maybe one impactful thing that's jumped out to you over the past month. We're in end of January right now, or moving towards it, looking back on 2024 and what you're excited about moving forward with those things.
Did we cover all 7?
Last one, 7. I said 6. They take calculated risk. Thank you, Brock.
My favorite one.
Okay. Talk about calculated risk real quick and send us off.
I don't want to send us off. We can keep going.
Okay, go ahead.
A calculated risk. I think this is my favorite thing because a lot of people want to ask me, "Oh, where do you put your money? How do you invest? Where should I put my money?" And when you think about that, everybody wants the quick and easy answer, and that's fine. Like in my financial planning practice on typical financial planning, there are some people that just say, "Hey, I don't want to know anything. We just need to put my money in places where it's going to grow and it's going to do its thing." And that is by all means, like, that is okay because that's you and that's where you're at in life. And that is fine. And we'll do that. Okay. But if you're asking the question, should I put it here? Should I put it there? Mutual funds, ETFs, index, like all these other places, you're not taking a calculated risk. And a lot of people, they think that high risk equals high return. And they correlate that by, if you ask somebody what they invest in, it immediately goes to the stock market. Like that is 90% of the time, that is what most people would just straight up go to. Because that's just what most of the marketing, that's what most of we have been indoctrinated with. But if you look at the wealthiest people, one of my favorite to look at is Ray Dalio, because of the fact that Ray Dalio runs one of the largest asset management firms in the world, if not the largest. And so that kind of correlates with the fact that they think investing in the stock market or investing is within the stock market, and that their goal is to get a high risk to get a high rate of return. Ray Dalio, one of the biggest owners, asset management firms, and considered one of the greatest investors, even though he's been down the last couple of years, is I think it's called the all-weather portfolio. The thesis, broken down in a very simple way, is how do I mitigate as much risk as possible while having the highest rate of return? Wait a second. So you're telling me one of the guys who owns one of the largest asset under management firms in the entire world, who is also considered one of the greatest investors in the world, is saying we want to build a portfolio that gives us the lowest risk with the highest rate of return, but yet everybody else is selling and saying you should get a high risk so you can get a high rate of return. Where people don't understand that, I don't know. It kind of leaves me dumbfounded, because you also look at guys like Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's rule is don't lose money. Rule number 2 is go back to rule number 1. How often is he going to blindly go invest in something without calculating the risk?
Yep.
Because when you invest in something, your number one goal should be don't lose your capital. Do not lose your principal. Because at the end of the day, you can't be a loser if all you do is take profits. And so another way that you could look at it is find me a mortgage company that's going to write a mortgage without looking at all kinds of stuff for you. They did that once. And you know what happened? It collapsed our economy. I doubt they're going to do that again.
Yep.
Even then, they still had to look at a couple of things, right? So as you are investing in things, if this is something that you're going to be involved in, if you are really paying attention to your wealth building, your goal should be to mitigate the risk as much as possible as you go into an investment while also achieving the highest rate of return possible.
I say this all the time. It reminds me of what we talk about, how most people are just playing the probability in their financial life that everything's going to work out exactly the way they're hoping it's going to work out. And I didn't have on my 2025 bingo card that we were going to have the greatest snowfall since 1890 in Beaumont, Texas. You know, like we don't know what next week is going to be. We don't know what tomorrow is going to be. And so I love what you just said. And when you said all weather, it just brought that thought right back in my head. It's like, you know, you've got to make sure that you are prepared for the ups and the downs in your financial life. And we have all these tools at our disposal through protection products, you know, insurance and things like that, to make sure that we're playing really great defense to give ourselves better opportunities for our offense. So protection is defense, offense is growing our money. So if we focus on protection and defense, we're going to play a better game.
Great stuff, guys. For anybody that's new and listening to this or been listening to us for a while or come to us from somebody else's similar podcast, the thing that the world convinces you of is that you don't have what you already need to start building a foundation for what your version of wealth is. And what it probably is that you haven't slowed down enough yet to be asked the questions that make you go through that thought experiment because of, you know, pride, or you're too busy, or whatever the case may be. And this is a never-ending thing. I'm only speaking for men, that the pride is always something you got to punch in the face. Nelson called it arrival syndrome. It's funny how when you start studying successful people, Ray Dalio, Warren Buffett, you know, Bob Castellone, Nelson Nash in our world, Garrett Gunderson, you see a resounding theme of tough lessons learned that bring them back to being foundationally sound and clear on what wealth means to them. And you'll hardly ever hear a number. It's always, I can travel with my family. I can go volunteer anytime I want to. I can help that person over there financially with no questions asked and no impact on anything. So we got to get clear on what wealth is. Then those dots will start aligning. And I said this past week with those men, we either are focused on trying to wrangle the dots into the correct order, or we're aware that there's a creator of the dots and our eyes need to be on him. And all those dots will align how they're supposed to when if they're supposed to, with how we get around certain people. So we're very glad that you joined us today. We hope that it was a blessing to you. We hope that we brought some kind of value. If you're sitting there going, what does this mean? What's next? How could I do this? You can always go to our website, cashflowlegendz.com, and you can schedule a time with us. That is no cost. Let me say that again. No cost. You're seeing what you think about us, and we're seeing what we think about you to see if we're a good fit. That doesn't take long to figure out for both sides. Okay? So if you feel drawn to do that, there's no commitment other than you getting on the schedule. And that is worth it because you and I will both learn something new. We will learn something new about each other, and we'll grow from that, whether we ever work together or not. And that's okay.
We're grateful for all of you that have already stepped
Yes.
into that, filled out, and joined us on a call so far.
That's exactly right. So you are your best investment. You have been given the skill sets to really succeed at a level you probably can't fathom yet. And getting around the right people to help you believe that is one of the most important things you can do while investing in yourself. So what is that one thing you can do that can create the most momentum for the next step? Shoot us a message, comment in the comment section, anything else that you'd like to, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. And we'll catch you on the next one, where we're going to talk about the debt snowball method versus the infinite banking method. And I've got all kinds of experience with these two, being a diehard Dave Ramsey follower for a long time, so it ought to be fun. Hope you guys have a great evening, and we'll catch you again soon.